Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
Hi, good everyone. How you going? Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Here we are again, recording from our studio in Sydney, trying to cover the whole national property market, helping property investors be more informed, better educated around making investment decisions which are positive and productive rather than negative. And it still pains me to hear stories, and I've sort of got one of those jobs. If I ever go to a barbecue and people know what I do for a living, they'll tell me all their great property stories, and they'll also tell me the horrible property stories. And if you speak to a cab driver, they'll always tell you about the bad property stories they hear. So we're doing our bit to try and help Australians invest better. We don't want you making those mistakes and those errors, which often are avoidable. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us. It's great to be part of your journey in investing in property and being a better property investor. And we're going to keep at it through 2020 on the Smart Property Investment Show. And that's going to mean a whole bunch of different things. You've been tuning in recently. We've been doing some deep dives with some property analytics type people. I've had some really cool investors in the studio chatting through their stuff. And we're also going to be drawing on our cadre of talented buyers agents who we have a relationship with within Smart Property Investment. And we're going to be getting them on the show over 2020. Some of them you might hear more than others. One of them is someone called Goose. You might have heard him before, Goose McGrath. Glen, I'm going to call you that. I'm sorry, I still can't move beyond it, from dashdot. How you going?
Very well, thanks. I was actually about to point out that you're still saying Goose very directively.
Yeah. Goose. And there's enough bass in the voice there to make it sound all right, but I'm going to call you Goose. How you going, Goose? You all right?
Very well, thanks, mate. Yeah. How are you?
Right,
happy 2020.
Yeah, happy 2020. And I think one of my goals for 2020 is to be able to say Goose a lot more naturally than the way I say it right now.
Well, you're going to have to practice. You're going to have to practice and warm up to it.
Well, you're going to be in the studio a bit, so that's a cool thing. So
absolutely,
we can do that. So you're going to join us a couple of times over 2020. And, we've been chatting about how we can approach that. And I'm pretty excited about those discussions, and I always enjoy getting together. We had that great chat live stream late last year on
it was awesome.
Unicorn Properties, was it? Is that what we did? And it was good fun, really good fun. We covered a lot of ground, which we probably won't go over again today, but a lot of those fundamentals are as relevant today as what they were then, and they always will be in property. So we'll get into some of that stuff today, this sort of mindset versus mechanics stuff, and I'm going to pick your brain on maybe some tools and tactics for 2020 to be a better investor. But on one of those episodes we do with you over 2020, I really want to do a bit of a Q&A thing with you. So there's a whole bunch of people listening to this who are probably going, I'd like to ask those guys some questions. So we'll do that live on air. We'll get Goose back in a couple of months' time. We'll go through that. But if you've got any questions at all around what we chat about today, or anything in general around property, get in touch with us. Now, there's two ways you can do it. The first one is a brand new advancement for Smart Property Investment 2020. We can now record your questions and we can play them live on air, and we'll answer them on air. So the way to do that is that you just need to go to smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. If you click on any of the episodes, but in particular ones where you see myself and Goose on it, there's a big button that says start recording. Just press that. Tell us what you reckon, press stop, and that'll come directly through to us, and we'll play that live on air. If you're still a little bit more analog than that, where there's a courier pigeon standing by, but no, you just go to editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. You can write your question in, and we'll get that read out live on air and answered, and we'll get Goose to help me do that. So smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Click on the podcast and click start recording. Go and check it out. If you have any problems, get in touch with the team. Again, editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. So going back to 2019 when we spoke about Unicorn Properties, it was depending who I'm chatting to in property sort of shapes the way in which I have a conversation with them, and you're quite comfortable with the more philosophical discussions around property. I think it's important to be connected in with that as a property investor, sort of art versus science type stuff. A lot of property investors I know are all about the numbers, and they've been told not to have any emotion in property around making decisions, and that's fine. I sort of tend to agree with that, but you need to have a good relationship with yourself to have a good relationship with property. So it's good to be a bit sort of thoughtful about it, mindset orientated, philosophical about it, so you can make sure that you can develop to more mature relationship with property and property investment decisions. So mindset versus mechanics. So question, I'll kick off with this. What's more important?
Well, what's more important out of mindset and mechanics?
Yeah.
I actually think that they are equally as important. I think this is where a lot of people kind of potentially make a bit of an error in judgment, or maybe something that actually slows them down on their journey. I mean, look, at the end of the day, really, most people are investing in real estate because they want to achieve an outcome. It's not just because they're super passionate about buying property. Although I do speak to some people who literally just only want deals. They're just really excited and they're just like, get me a deal. Whereas most people, it's a vehicle to take them to where they want to go. And I think that that's why you really have to have those two things married together quite synchronistically. Because if you only focus on tactics and you don't have your principles, if you take it back to actually, you're a business owner and I'm a business owner and a lot of other people can relate. A business has, mission, vision, values. Okay. And that's the guiding principles that are going to dictate the journey of that business. Now, if you think about your life in a very similar kind of way, in your property journey specifically, because as a property investor, you're essentially running a business. Okay. And you got to think about that in the same way. What is the purpose? What is my vision? What are my values? Why am I doing this? Where do I want to go? Because only then will you understand the tactics that you need to move you towards that destination. And the thing is, it's going to be different for literally everyone. So understanding that, and that's why I think the two have to go really well together, because if you only have the mindset, I don't believe that you can dream it and it can happen. I don't think that that's true. I don't believe necessarily in just manifesting everything in your life. I do think that, there's some cadence in that, in all of that kind of stuff. But really, you've got to understand how to apply mechanical, tactical, science-based thinking to strategic, philosophical, value-based, purposeful, mindset-based analogies. Make sense?
How do you know if you're out of balance?
That is a great question. There's quite a few ways of doing it. I think if you can just ask yourself why. Very simply, if you just ask yourself
all the
why,
time or just sometimes?
All the time. I ask myself why pretty much about everything. Now, there's a strain of questioning called Socratic interviewing, which is basically a continuous quest for the truth. Okay, and that can be applied in many different, conversational styles, but it's a philosophical way of trying to find the ultimate answer. And really, it's just a constant questioning of why. If you really break it down, well, why is that? Why do you think that's important? Why is that important? What are you trying to achieve? And why do you want to achieve that? All of that kind of stuff. So if you break that down, so there's that kind of question you can ask yourself. I mean, really when it comes down to it though, if you want to create some kind of measurable system by whether you can gauge, are you in alignment or not in alignment? I think generally, and we've gone straight to esoteric here, and we'll probably get into some tactics and all that kind of stuff in a minute. But if you ever feel in your life, and Phil, maybe you can tell me if you've ever felt like this, if you ever feel in your life like you're just running into a brick wall, energetically, you're feeling like, God, I'm not getting anywhere. I keep trying harder and I'm not getting what I want and all this kind of stuff. You feel frustrated and tired and all these kind of things. You don't feel like you're progressing. That's probably a good sign that you need to take stock. The antithesis of that is when everything just seems to happen perfectly for you and you're really in a state of flow, okay? And when you're in a state of flow, that would be a state of balance. Okay, that would be when you've got all the areas in your life equally balanced in a harmonious unity, yin and yang, equally, positioned against each other. And when it's not that way, you're going to feel tension. Okay, so we'll bring it down again in a second. There's kind of 6 key areas. If you really wanted to focus on it, if anyone does feel this way, there's 6 key areas that you can focus on and question yourself. There's health, social, family, finance, career, and intellect and mindset. So where I tend to see a lot of people go wrong is they'll focus too heavily on one area. So for example, they'll be focused on money, finance, all of that kind of stuff, of which obviously real estate investing is a major part, because real estate investing really, it's a wealth creation strategy. We're here to deliver ourselves to a better outcome. But a lot of people can position that against stuff like health, social, and things can get out of balance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it goes back to your sort of maturity and how you can control those different forces which influence your level of happiness or your flow versus, lack of flow to make decisions, effective decisions, investing in property. And I think some people probably a handful of people are fortunate enough that just happens organically. And whether that's through life experience or whatever else, they do all of that stuff and they don't know that they're doing it. Whereas a lot of people actually need to train themselves to actually think that way. And that's what I hope a lot of people that listen to this podcast go about doing, because if you can balance those 6 things out, that's when you hit your flow, right?
That's when you get in flow.
That's when, the part of the French, shit happens. And it's good stuff. It's the good stuff, not the bad stuff. So you got to work on that. So what would be some tangible, practical ways that people can start down that journey if they feel like they're struggling with it? Just be aware of it. Is that probably the start?
Okay, so to go into the tactics,
sounds like On the Couch with Goose, right?
Like I came onto the Smart Property Investment Show and we're talking about how to find your deep spirituality on your property journey with Goose.
Sorry, I don't know if probably an appropriate question, but this is sort of more philosophical. People have different connections with their spiritual side or their whatever you call it, right? Yeah. Are you that way inclined? Like, am I allowed to ask you that question?
You can ask me whatever you want.
Like, are you a religious man, or
No.
what philosophy do you guide your life by? Is it a Buddhist philosophy, or is it something that is it the Goose's philosophy?
That's a great question. That is a great question. And it's none of that. It is constant questioning of why. If I had to boil it down to the most basal kind of direction of that, I would say science, because true science is not correct. True science is always completely fallible. Any scientific approach, and this again goes to anything you're doing, including property investing, is only as good as what you know right now. Okay. So, when you can take elements of Buddhist philosophy and all of this kind of stuff, you can really boil that down into quantum mechanics, physics, all of that kind of stuff, see how that applies in a really scientific way, and then you just also then got to say, well, I'd actually have no idea anyway. So spiritual, yes. Religious, no.
Okay, let's probably keep about this all day, and no doubt it'll be a theme moving forward, but we have to move on because there are other parts of property investing. I imagine there's a whole bunch of people going, this is cool.
Yeah.
I love these conversations. They might be drinking a glass of wine or maybe partaking in other things, which is giving them a more open mind. I don't know, that some people are wired that way, but however they choose to embrace the part of their brain that they don't normally talk to, it's good to explore those things every now and then. However you do, that's up to you. But this is mechanical stuff, and I want to get into that. But before we do, let's go to a quick break. Back in a moment.
At Passionate Property Investors, we hear from a lot of infinite learners who love to know more and share more about their property knowledge and investment journey. If this sounds like you and you want to get more education where your eyeballs are, then join us on Facebook at Passionate Property Investors. Videos, ebooks, and learning pathways to get your property cup filled up. Not to mention free education with a tribe who gets it. Join today by searching Passionate Property Investors on Facebook.
Welcome back, everyone. Here with Goose from dashdot. We're chatting through property and the balance between art and science, or effective mindset and the mechanics. And a lot of people like thinking, feeling about stuff and never really get to the doing of stuff. And the mechanics of good property investment it's an art form as well as a science, knowing how to balance the different parts of making effective buying decisions, and then the whys of all that sort of stuff and how you manage property. So kicking off into 2020, where do you start and finish with the tools, the mechanics of property investment? If you're relatively new to this and you're going, what are these guys even talking about? Is this the how of property investing, effective property investing, do you think?
Well, okay, so let's just zoom in and out at the same time in a couple of little parts of the things you just said. So if you're just starting out in property investing, or if you're just starting out even listening to this podcast and you're thinking, what the hell is all this even about? I genuinely believe that one of the most important parts of any wealth creation journey comes from understanding, firstly, your outcomes, but also your position. So when you want to talk about the tactics, tools, strategies, mechanics of property investing, I'm going to let listeners in on a little secret.
Right.
It's actually not that hard, okay? It's actually not that hard. Simple, but not easy, okay? And this is always the thing. The things that are most successful are simple, but not necessarily easy. The simple thing that anyone on their property investing journey really needs to understand, if they want to continue to grow a scalable property portfolio, if they want to be able to have a prolific, profitable portfolio long-term that's going to allow them to, live the life that they want, and whether that be a life of impact on a global level or whether that be a life of impact on a family level, that's really what it comes down to when most people are investing. There's a destination that is greater than the sum of themselves, okay? It really comes down to understanding three things: cash flow, growth, and the ability to control the asset value over the long term, okay? So there's three things of what we call the Holy Trinity. We've covered these kind of ground before, but if you really kind of go, okay, I'm starting out, what do I need to know? It's that simple. As long as you've got cash flow positive properties in high growth areas with value add potential, you're going to be setting yourself up to achieve what you want. Even if you're still working that out, if you follow those core principles, you're going to be moving that direction regardless, and that's going to help set you up so you don't hit a roadblock down the line.
And when you look at those three core principles, is that your filter, your mechanism for working out decision making? So I need to make a decision. How does it fit against these? I need to make a decision. How does it fit against these? Is that how you use them?
Yeah. So obviously with property, those three core principles, we don't ever deviate from them.
So irrespective of where you're buying, what you're buying, how you're buying it, it's all the same.
Exactly. So then where you come into then is they're the core principles, but then you've got to apply that vector or that prism against where you are on your journey, because there's loads of different ways to interpret that. Okay, what is high cash flow? What is high growth? What types of value add strategies are there? So that's where I think really people need to start thinking about where they are on their journey and self-identifying. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I get to speak to a lot of property investors, aspirational property investors, experienced property investors, people that are partway through, people that have made mistakes, all kinds, and personally, I love it. I love helping people wherever they are on their journey. Interestingly though, I'll speak to first-time investors or people that haven't invested yet that are really confused, and they're like, oh, I think I need to do a subdivision, or maybe I need to do this kind of thing. And it's like, well, okay, maybe you're thinking not in the right paradigm. Okay, so I think it's very easy if we can kind of help people to understand where they are on their journey. We've kind of identified 3 key tiers, and if you follow the kind of natural progression of those tiers, you're going to get to where you want to go faster. It's kind of a case of slowing down to speed up, because it's easy to chase higher return deals, but if you chase them at the wrong point in your journey, you're going to find yourself emotionally burnt out. You're going to be stressed. If you've never done a subdivision renovation before and you take on too much and you stuff it up and all of that kind of stuff, you really put yourself far behind. And not only that, is you're going to end up closing the book on your journey, because you're going to go, whoa, I tried property investing and wow, that was hardcore and that's not for me anymore. So I think, did you want to kind of break down those tiers?
Yeah, I reckon.
Okay, so the way I kind of see it, and I think this really applies for pretty much anyone on their property journey, there's 3 distinct phases. The first phase is what we call a foundational phase. Now, in that, broadly bucketed asset class and that stage of your journey, typically what we'd be looking for is $200,000 to $400,000 assets, minimum 5.5% yield, but you really want to be positioning yourself in an area for strong growth. Okay, because just hitting those kind of 2 key metrics of price and yield is not going to really get you to where you want to go. And on top of that, you want to think about how can I add some value to it. It's not about taking on a major project. It's about having a lever that you can control, but it's also within the realms of your emotional fortitude. Okay, because that's a big thing for people. They don't want to overstretch their skills, capabilities, and where they're at. So that could be like a $15,000 cosmetic renovation, or it could be changing the layout to add another room and increasing the value in the yield that way, turning it from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom, stuff like that. It's kind of controlled within the asset. Does that make sense? Yeah. Awesome. So that's going to create cash flow, help people move forward on their journey, all that kind of stuff. Now, how many of those do you need to buy? It's a little bit elastic. Where are you starting? You're starting at $200,000 or you're starting at $400,000. But the aim of the game really is you want to build enough liquid equity or available equity within your risk profile to allow you to safely use that equity and the cash flow you build in your portfolio to lever up to take on more advanced projects. Okay, because by that time you will have got a couple of runs on the board, 3, 4 properties maybe. And then you go, okay, well, what's next? How can I get a bit more out of this? And what can I do? Now, once you've got a bit more equity and a little bit more cash flow and you've got a bit more stability, that's why we call it a foundation. You've got to really get the base in. That's when you can lever up to do stuff like subdivision projects where they take a bit longer, they require more capital, you've got higher holding costs, but hey, there's higher returns. That takes a different level of emotional fortitude. And then you can do a few of those. But again, you've always got that foundational base that's going to continue to grow and support that future growth. And it's going to de-risk your whole strategy. Because if you try and jump too far ahead too quickly, you're just going to basically be on shaky ground. And if you make one wrong turn, the whole thing's going to fall over. So it's really about going systematically and following the right process. Because at the end of the day, success is a process, not an event. It's, and people need to fall in love with the journey and not the destination. That's what I think. Further to that, once you've actually built up enough equity and all of that kind of stuff, and you've become a bit more of an advanced, more sophisticated investor, this journey happens over time as well. It's not something that people are going to race into and do straight away. Yeah. But that's when you can start to lever up into what we call legacy assets, stuff like unit blocks and small developments, and again, stuff with higher return, but a different level of sophistication.
There's quite a lot of info there. Go and check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au if there's anything there you're unsure of. And Goose, let's get you maybe writing a piece for us on that sort of stuff.
I absolutely love to, yeah. Because I think if people can understand that journey, it helps them to understand where they are.
Yeah, and it's pretty base stuff. Like you need to understand this sort of stuff just to effectively invest in property, and and that's a good resource to have. So we'll make sure that happens. We're sort of 2-3 months into January now, 2020. So it's still
2-3 weeks.
Weeks. It feels like months, right? That's a slip of the tongue. It feels like it in a break. But what are people talking to you about? You're getting phone calls from investors right across the nation. Are they what's their hopes, their fears? Are they all sitting around going, geez, I really buggered up 2019 because I didn't do anything because I was worried about the world, but now I'm 12 months behind. What's going on?
Yeah, so there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on. We kept the doors open and the phones on all through Christmas, which was really cool because there was a lot of people that really wanted to talk and to try and get an understanding of where to go in their property journey over that period of time. So it's great opportunity to connect and to help guide people, right? Now, the big things that I'm hearing from people is, yes, I waited out of the market for all of 2019 because I thought the world was going to end and now it hasn't. And now I'm a year behind. Can you help, please? There's this kind of thing of people going, okay, that probably wasn't the smartest thing to do. They realize that,
So more FOMO than JOMO.
Yeah.
Joy of missing out versus
fear
of missing out, right? So now they're going, I'm happy I sort of missed out a lot of 2019 because it's put me in a good spot to invest very well in 2020.
Well, totally. And again, this is about understanding where you are in your journey, right?
Yeah.
And understanding your portfolio and also understanding where you're going. And this is where it comes back to, the whole art versus science kind of capacity. It's like, okay, why, where am I? What am I trying to achieve? Because there's hundreds of ways to make money in property. So you got to understand what's going to be your ideal strategy and where you're going to go with it and all that kind of stuff. So some people have kind of realized they've missed the boat and there's ways that they could have progressed and kept themselves at a low risk. Now, going back to how do you de-risk your strategy? Well, it's really simple. Follow those core principles. There's three core principles: cash flow, growth, and value add. You're going to have the ability to control that asset kind of whatever. Interest rates go up, you still got cash flow. You've got ways to cushion it. So there's a lot of people that are kind of concerned about that kind of stuff, or I guess concerned that they missed out. Some people are quite pragmatic and think, well, statistically, we probably are going to have an economic downturn at some point. So how can I continue to invest? And what happens if we have low growth or limited growth or flatline growth the next few years? Because it does happen. It only takes a broad brushstroke view at the global economy, and you can see other economies where that's happened, which is why I think a lot more people this year already, we're only 3 weeks into January, and a lot more people are having conversations around cash flow, which is pretty interesting. Now, obviously with this state of finance at the moment, it's cheap to get money at the moment. Banks are quite slow. Okay. So it's not easy to get money, but it's cheap to get money. So a lot of people are thinking, great, I can get in now and it's easy to get cash flow, which is true. Okay. But you got to think long-term as well and how that's going to affect, your long-term strategy. And investing just for cash flow is not a good idea. So it's still about positioning yourself to kind of do those kind of things. So that's kind of really the number one thing that I see. A lot of people are like, I don't know where I am on my journey. How do I know what to do? What strategy should I follow? Why did I wait so long? And now's the time to buy. I need to get in the market. And I can tell you that even just in the last 5 days, the volume of calls that we've had from buyers suddenly realizing they need to take action now has at least multiplied by 5 compared to the week before. There's a lot more intensity in the marketplace at the moment.
So let's have a chat about if you're one of those people and you want to make hay, i.e., I think it's always the best time to invest in property if you can afford to invest in property and you've got your strategy in place. So for those people looking to invest, where's the places where you should be concentrating on right now? I want to touch on that quickly, but just go to a break quickly beforehand. Back in a moment.
If you're a regular listener to the Smart Property Investment Show, then odds are you're already a property fanatic who loves hearing stories on investing from real people, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Be with people just like you and join the group Passionate Property Investors on Facebook now. Become part of a community who know what to do and when to do it. And the time to do it is now. Passionate Property Investors. Tribe, tools, and tips. Find us on Facebook today.
Welcome back, everyone. Here with Goose from dashdot. Where should we be investing at the moment? Can you give us any, these people who are sort of going, hey, I want to be in the market. What sort of stuff do you like at the moment? It doesn't need to be necessarily where, but how can you frame good investment decisions?
How can you frame good investment decisions? Well, again,
in 2020.
Well, again, not to kind of just keep rehashing the same point, but it's really about where you're going first. One of the biggest questions I ask people, because a lot of people come to me and go, where should I buy? What should I buy? It's like, well, firstly, what are you trying to achieve and by when? So you've got to answer those questions. Now, again, then we can take a broad brushstroke analysis and go, okay, well, where am I going to find yields? Where am I going to find growth? Where am I going to find all of these kind of factors that are going to play into my decision-making? I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make is they do get FOMO of hotspots. So, for example, Brisbane, and again, I say this in a very light way because you can find a good deal in any market. That's just a fact. You can go somewhere and find a good deal in any market. However, when you want to look at kind of overarching economic positioning, a lot of people are still trying to rush towards Brisbane, and what that's creating is the movement that we're going to see over the next couple of months in terms of prices rising, all that kind of stuff. In fact, I was talking to a colleague of mine in the industry who was very excited. There was 52 people at an open home the other day at one of the houses that he was trying to buy. And he was trying to tell me how great it was. And I'm thinking, well, why would you want to invest in a market where there's that much competition? Okay, because to me, that means you're too late. Okay, so it's really about understanding that and not getting caught in your emotions. So whilst we want to understand our emotions internally, we don't want to project our emotions onto our finance, because those two things don't mix. Okay, you really need to be tactical when it does come down to making those financial decisions. Okay, so where is the big question, right? Where? Okay, so it really, again, comes down to what you're aiming for. So if you're in that kind of foundational tier,
it's the best way we can look at it, the foundational tier.
Yeah, if you're in that foundational tier and that's kind of that $200,000 to $400,000 broad packet, 5.5% yields, we're seeing pretty cool stuff. And actually, before I start talking about locations, I want to talk about a responsibility piece, because I'm really big on this. I actually don't mind telling people, hey, here's where you can go, because I want to help people. I want to help people build wealth. That's why we started our business. The problem is people get a little bit of information, but not enough. And people armed with a little bit of information can be quite dangerous to themselves.
Yeah.
And so, for example, if someone were to say Albury, and I'm not saying Albury, by the way, just to clarify that, but if someone was to say, hey, Albury is a great place to invest, and you were to race over to Albury and just go, well, I heard it's great, and you buy a house randomly, you run a very, very, very serious risk of buying the wrong property in the wrong place, and it doesn't work out. The difference between a good street and a bad street can literally affect the growth metrics of a property by 1.8%. So we're talking about pretty major impacts there. So I'm going to keep it broad and not go too specific, because I don't want people to make some mistakes, okay?
I'll probably add to that responsibility piece, just because, and someone wants to use you as a buyer's agent or your accountant or whoever I think you should be trusting your advisors, but you also need to challenge your advisors as well. What they tell you is in your best interest if you're using the right type of person, but you're still responsible for making the decision of acting on that information. So there's responsibility sort of sits with the investor across, all these different frameworks. And I hear a lot when investors say, oh yeah, I went to this seminar and I was told by an expert to invest in this place. I went and did it, and it was a data investment, right? Well, you acted on information that you received, whether or not that was the right information or the wrong information. That's your responsibility to work out whether or not it was like that. So it's a bit of a minefield, this whole space.
Well, absolutely. And I think that goes all the way. And this is great, because we're actually winding this all the way back to the very start of the conversation when you said, what is the greatest question anyone can ever ask? And that is why. So if you do go to a seminar, if you do find someone who's suggesting, oh no, buy this thing in this development or buy this thing in this location, ask why. And straight up, if there's no transparency and if you don't believe the integrity and honesty and the truth and the validation, then
don't
act on it. It's really that simple, and this is not a game where anyone should be saying, trust me, ever. And I always say that too. If I can't show you the validation, if I can't explain to you the clear and logical reasons that have drawn my pathway to this location, we ain't got a deal. It's that simple, right? Now,
learn to say no.
Exactly. The most successful investors in history. So Warren Buffett famously says no more than he ever says yes to anything. He's just always no. And that's, helps guide his principles. Now, I'm not saying say no to property investing, but question and ask why. Like, where is my information coming from? What's the validation? And whose actual best interests are at heart here?
So back to locations.
Yep.
With the disclaimer of responsibility. And, I extend that disclaimer saying this is just a general conversation, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone knows the drill. We're trying to just inform and educate you to make more informed decisions.
Yeah.
What do you reckon? Where? Not Brisbane.
Okay, I know I'm dancing around this a little bit, but I want to keep it interesting, right? I want to talk about some overarching kind of trends, right? Yep. So
let's say there is probably a good spot.
Okay. Yeah. So 2020 is a year of cash flow, the way I see it. I think a lot of people are wanting to make sure they've got cash flow in their portfolio to bolster themselves, protect themselves from market forces, make sure they've got liquidity to keep going forward. Simple. Okay. So yes, there is still some good buying opportunities in Brisbane, but again, you got to make sure you can get the yield. Make sure that you're not investing emotionally. Like, Brisbane's a good market. It's going to have good population growth. Now, over the coming months, I expect that we're going to be seeing a lot more excitement and a lot more interest, particularly in Sydney and in Melbourne. Now, it's not hard to see that Melbourne's probably going to outstrip Sydney in terms of growth over the next 18 months to 24 months. Long term, it'll remain to be seen. But in terms of population pressures and macroeconomic drivers, building approval, supply and demand, the basic metrics, it looks like Melbourne's going to go pretty well. The caveat to that, again, is the growth is going to be good, but can you get the yields? Okay, because you've got to cushion yourself against those kind of downturns. Just to invest for growth is a very flimsy kind of strategy. So, we'll probably see in the west of Sydney and also probably in the west of Melbourne, we're going to see a lot more growth stimulated in those areas because that's where the projects are and that's where the affordability lies. You can't go too far wrong sticking with the affordable areas because that opens up the marketplace to more potential buyers. So investors, first-time buyers, and also, middle class, upper middle class, lower class, all of these kind of people who want to live in more affordable areas. So, we have already been seeing really good signs in Melbourne in the southeast, but the thing is there, it's in a kind of higher price bracket and not necessarily suited to the average investor. So there's a couple of touch points on 3 of the major capitals. Adelaide's good for a number of reasons. So because of the number of projects, the scale of the projects, and also the longevity and the jobs growth based in the projects that are moving into Adelaide now, we're starting to see, I guess, a lot of the talk about Adelaide, I think, is really sort of starting to come into its own, particularly in the first half of this year and moving into the back half of this year. I think that it's opened up now, not just to the kind of 500K plus price point, which is where it was when it was a bit closer to the CBD. It's also broadened out a little bit more as well. So it's affordable to get in and get good yields and get good growth. In fact, we're seeing a lot more movement in that market there at the moment. I'm talking to agents there in that market fairly regularly. And let me just tell you, it's definitely warming up in that space. Tasmania, we're seeing some interesting activity in a couple of little spots. So I don't want to delve too much into Tasmania because there's not too many places you can talk about without giving away the secrets. But I'm expecting to see a lot of interesting stuff coming out of some parts of Tasmania this year. But again, that's on a pretty low price point. The attractiveness there is the straight out cheap houses. So it's a cheap market to get into with high yields, and that's driving a lot of investors to go over there. Plus there's some immigration schemes that are going to be driving a lot more jobs growth in the area, some tourism projects, which are going to have a large impact on small communities. Okay, and over the long term. So that's good. And then when you even start swinging around and, looking over to the west, it's very hard to say what's going to happen with Perth. I think this year is going to go better for sure, but I think it's going to remain patchy. I think it's really going to be limited to some select suburbs as opposed to taking a market as a whole. I can't see broad acre growth happening in Perth, but I think there's definitely money to be made. And we've been investing in there very tactically over the past 6 months for some of our clients, particularly based around subdivision briefs and all of that kind of stuff. And the same thing goes for some major regional centres in Victoria, and really this again comes down to where you are, what tier you're at and what stage you're at. Are you an acceleration stage investor? Because I can tell you there's better subdivision projects to be found, in regional Victoria. And when I say regional, I'm talking about regional centres, major cities, than, some other parts of the country.
We've covered a lot there, Goose.
Well, I wanted to try and bring some value. Coming onto this show really was like, okay, well, how can we actually try and help people get an understanding of what's going on out there?
Well, that's the idea, right? And if anything there has resonated with you and want to ask us any questions, remember, click that button, start recording, probably where you're listening to this right now, if it's on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. If you're not listening to it there, go there, click on the button, send us your question, we'll play it out, we'll get that answered. If you want to do it the more old-fashioned way, just contact editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Even for anything you just want to have a chat about, contact the team. We're pretty good at getting back to you, so let us know what's happening. We'll see you again in the studio soon, Goose, no doubt, next month or so, no, maybe?
Yeah, in the next couple of months.
Next couple of months, we'll have a bit of chat. If there's anything you want me to specifically chat to Goose about, again, get in touch with us and we can make all that happen. I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Social media is Smart Property HQ and all the different channels. Go and check it out. You can send us a direct message through there if that's what you like to do. And we'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.